Sweet. All right, Stephen Cho, so that's my name. Again, really thankful to just share a little bit about my story and really how God's mission has been kind of woven into my life. So no slides, but at least hopefully the translation is pretty good. So my first memory, I would say, in the Philippines, actually was getting off a plane, and it was very hot and humid. And I remember immediately getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. At least I kind of felt that way when I was as a 5-year-old. Really just having gotten off the plane from a cold Chicago winter where I was born. Living in the Philippines as an MK, I would say it was pretty memorable in many ways. Just interesting things like I just have these kind of episodic memories about is just everyday life. There were some inconveniences, like there was a bunch of brownouts, so those are just rolling blackouts where the electricity would be gone. We'd have to store tap water in big plastic bins, just in case the water got shut off. But mostly it was just good memories. I would say mostly go to school, play with my middle brother and then my youngest brother when he was born in the Philippines, and just the kids next door. I think it's good memories overall that I have of my time there when I was a young child. Once in a while I would get to see some of the work that my parents were doing as missionaries in the Philippines. Being able to tag along, to go to their office, to see the various folks that they were working with, the Filipinos, the missions work that they were doing. One time I do remember tagging along with my father to essentially what's a massive city trash dump. It was right outside Manila, and essentially there was an entire community of people who were living there, just right on top of the trash. I still remember the stench of the trash. It was just so thick, and even though I was just maybe 5-6 years old at the time, I still remember it to this day. And I remember seeing a child about my age rummaging through the trash, kind of inspecting cans and plastic to kind of see essentially what's in there. Is there something worth salvaging? I wonder about that kid from time to time and what became of him. So for me, really as a kid, I knew missions as just what my parents did. I was too young to really probably even understand what God, what Jesus meant in my life, and the significance of what they did for their work. And while I was not actively participating in missions, I really saw my parents serving with joy, the work that they did there. And I would say that experience has been pretty formative to my life and just my faith overall. Fast forward many years, so I'm much older now, and let's say a few years back, I'm on a flight to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. So I'm sitting next to a Mongolian grandpa named Dorj. He was just in California visiting his children and grandchildren, and he was returning home. And we got to just chatting. Well, not really chatting. He didn't speak English. I didn't speak any Mongolian, so we were trying to just communicate through gestures. I was using a translation guidebook to be able to try to just talk to him. And yeah, it was a kind of a really interesting experience at the time. And for me, what was I doing at that time? I was heading to Mongolia as a 27-year-old at the time, having committed to the year of overseas missions. Yeah, being in Mongolia for a year was not at all in my plans. Until just 6 months prior to that flight. I was working in finance in New York City. After college, my career was progressing really well. I was able to, essentially kind of living out what I kind of planned and dreamed of, going through school and then post-school as well. But interestingly, God reminded me of a missions commitment I had made in college during the Urbana Missions Conference. We went 20 years ago, and God just, I couldn't ignore it. He just kept reminding me over and over, just over a course of a few months, and that's when I decided, hey, I think I need to essentially, follow that calling at the time. So that's how I ended up teaching business courses at Mongolia International University, which is essentially a missionary founded and run university in Mongolia, and that was kind of my time there. It was a very humbling year, I would say. Not only was I living through a very harsh winter, Mongolian winter is pretty brutal, and I'm just kind of stumbling my way through teaching college students, several hundred of them, and across many courses. I'm not a teacher by training, but I was just trying to figure out how to create syllabi, just lecture to 60, 70 kids at a time, and they're pretty young, and many of them did not care about being educated. Not sure why they were paying money to go to college, but there they were. One episode I would say that sticks out in my mind from that time. So it was early in the first semester. I had just given a quiz to essentially a business math class. I didn't realize that until some points, students pointed it out after the quiz, that I had actually made a mistake in writing one of the problems, and which made it impossible to solve. It was pretty embarrassing to have made that mistake, and I let the students know and removed that question from the quiz, and had let them know. And then just like a couple hours later, I received this email from a student with just Bible verses. These verses from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27 to 29. It says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things, and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." You can imagine, receiving an email from a student with that. At first my reaction was like, wow, how dare you send me that, right? I didn't even have a good relationship with the student. Obviously they were a Christian student, and they were sending me this email with verses about this. It really angered me, honestly. Then I thought about it more and actually prayed about it, and recognized that maybe it was God using these verses to tell me something, to tell me to be humble, right, so that no one may boast before him. I reflected on that past week of classes that I'd had, and had seen a lot of glimpses of just kind of prideful attitude that I had. Me being this person from New York City, who was working in finance, and now I'm going to Mongolia, and I'm imparting my wisdom on you guys. I realized that I was just being so, prideful in my attitude, just the lack of humility, and understanding that I really just wasn't, reflecting Christ in that way. So again, no matter what, the students were not, let's say, blameless, right? Some were cheating, and some were doing some things that I think would have made anyone angry. But no matter what, I'm there as a missionary, and And I shouldn't have. I should have been much more gracious. And really, it just took that student's email for me to understand that. So since that year in Mongolia, which was quite a number of years ago now, I've been trying to kind of weave God's mission into the work that I've been called to. So Pastor Tim Keller writes in his book, Every Good Endeavor, all work has dignity because it reflects God's image in us, and because the material creation we are called to care for is good. And every Christian should be able to identify the ways in which his or her work participates with God in his creativity and cultivation. For me, my current work, brings together my talents in finance and business and applies it to an area that I really enjoy, which is technology startups. So the work that I do really is helping companies from the ground up, really just like starting up and helping them grow and scale, understanding and reaching product market fit, gaining funding, and being able to really ideally be able to make some impact on this world. So how does that look like in practice in terms of how I think about my career and tying it in with my faith, and really just being able to reflect God in that way? First thing is just how I think about the companies that I'm working with. I want to work, I try to work with companies where there's a company mission that resonates with me. Again, these are still for-profit companies, so they're building interesting products that are trying to make a profit. But how is it that I can be a part of something where ideally the product has an actual positive impact to society, even in a small way, right? It may not be changing the world, it may not be curing cancer, but it's able to do something that is really at least interesting and positive. Also work with good people, right? People that have integrity, people that we can work together as a team, whether they're Christian or not, whatever they believe or whatever background that they have, and in the end that they are people with great integrity and positive, and also work somewhere where I can have an impact. So that's kind of how I think about the type of things that I do. And once I'm at a company, really the second piece is how do you make decisions in a way that reflect my values and really just Christ's values. So whether that's in the products that we make, whether that's in how we market the product and the service, marketing honestly, not trying to deceive, just being very forthcoming. Also operating within any type of legal or regulatory bounds. So, I work a lot in fintech, which is kind of financial technology, and there's a lot of regulations around kind of banking and whether it's insurance or various aspects, and just making sure that we as a company are operating in a way that is with high integrity and honest. And three, just kind of the everyday interactions that you have with your colleagues. If there are organic opportunities for me to share my story with colleagues, just I think God kind of leads in certain ways, and I'm able to do that. And I think people can see, hopefully, that I'm reflecting, Christ positively. So that's kind of how I think about the things in terms of that living my faith out in my workplace in that way. Again, it's a complete work in progress. I am far from good at that, and I think it'll be an ongoing thing for the rest of my life. But I think that I do know and trust that God really just kind of never fails to remind me, whether it's through, emails from students or different, things that happen in terms of in the workplace or through just reading the Word, that I'm just a constant kind of work that He is in person and a vessel really that God is working through to kind of impact my work, my workplace, even though it looks nothing like what my parents are doing in terms of just kind of full-time vocational missionary work, but that I still feel like that I'm a full-time kind of missionary in the work that I do, and even in the life that I live